This is the Color Theory Final Project presentation, choosing a parent image. I'm going to be jumping over the next couple of projects here for a moment because I want to give you some heads up about what's coming for the final, and you'll need to select what's known as a parent image for that. I'll get into what I mean by the parent image here in a little bit, but I want to give you an example of some of the things that I think would be ideally responsible, or good examples for images to use for this. In the realm of popular culture, I know that many students are interested in anime, and these would probably be some pretty good examples to use from that genre of thing. If you'll notice, a lot of the spectrum colors are represented here. There are any number of very colorful examples in the realm of anime that would make perfectly acceptable parent images. Uh, the sole criteria being that they be colorful, and we want them to be, have a wide range of colors present in them. Most of these that we're looking at here would suit the bill just fine. Now, here's an example of one that's bordering on not being too good, and I think you'll see what I mean by it's because due to the fact that it has a limited palette. Most of this is tending towards the brown and the sepia range. On the other hand, this is a great one because nearly every color in the spectrum is represented here. Again, this is a good example. There are a lot of blue and green, but there's still plenty of other colors to work with. And when we get to what I'm going to ask you to do with this, I think you'll understand what I'm looking for here. I also recognize the popularity of Minecraft and various other video games. Every semester, these things change, so with time, I'll probably have to update this video. But I want you to consider, and you're not limited to any of these. These are just suggestions, and as a matter of fact, you can go out and look for any number of different things that you think will be acceptable. This one would be great again. You may be confused as to what I'm talking about as far as the parent image is concerned, but we'll get back to that here in just a moment. And to round out the video game selection, this would be an interesting example, even though it's restricted to the yellow, magenta, red range of the spectrum. When it is put through the changes, and we'll get to that in a moment, I think you'll understand why I think it would be a perfectly acceptable example. Now, changing gears here for a moment, these are also quite a number of examples that can be gleaned from movie posters. These next examples were done by people who had redone popular movie posters in a style of their own, akin to stained glass. This movie was popular about 25 years ago, and this person's decided to take it on and separate it into particular, like, stained glass motif. And when we get to what I'm showing you as far as the parent image is concerned, you'll see why this one would be particularly good. Of course, everyone recognizes this movie. Someone, they took on the job of breaking it out and changing it into this stained glass effect. But there's a lot of colors represented here, and this would be a good example. These were all done at around the same time and using that same stained glass window style, and that's what would make them particularly good examples to be using for your final project. Movie posters are particularly suited because they are recognizable examples, and what we'll be doing with these to make the examples, they'll make the examples much more interesting and shocking. Because what we want to do is we want people to see a recognizable example of something and see the changes that are imposed. Now, some additional examples from times past are used. The album artwork from recognizable recording artists. These are very dated, but they're colorful nevertheless. Here's an example of an old Grateful Dead album cover. This would be a particularly interesting example. I don't think anybody that I know has ever done this one. And here's another Grateful Dead album cover that would be particularly interesting rather. Some folks remember Janis Joplin. I scanned this one from a version of this very album that I have hanging on the wall in my kitchen. The album's still inside. That is the vinyl record, even though it's probably no longer playable, as though it appears now as though it were played on a lathe. Most of it's scratched beyond recognition. Um, there are numerous examples that would work from this era, and probably many present-day recording artists as well. Though you have to recognize that the album art is really quite a thing of the past. There was a time when you could listen to an album and sit and study the sleeve for hours on end, but those are days past, and things going out in even the CD is dying now because all music is now available online and in MP3 format. So why bother with an album? Anyway, one of the final groups that I'm going to put up here are classic travel posters. These are only a few of the many that are available for copying on the internet. They stem from a time when the four-color printing process was achieved by overlapping colors to create a wider range of colors. These depictions were meant to entice people to travel to exotic and faraway places, and they appear lush and inviting, and they stem from a time when color photography was terribly expensive to use in advertising art, and the entire style was culturally accepted as a norm. So, take a look. If you're looking for something out of the ordinary that you want to try to use as a parent image, these would be perfectly wonderful things to do. And now we're going to go into a description of what we're going to be doing with these images. Your first task will be to reinterpret the parent image into a spectrum of colors that we'll be creating for or by our class. This will be a 24-step color wheel. And there'll be more on this in a bit. I will describe this in an upcoming video as well, but I want to give you a heads up to be going out and looking for these images. Once you've created your parent image, I will want you to create 5 additional versions of it like this, and I'll get into more description about this later, but I want you to give an idea of what we're going to be doing with these. If you'll notice, in this particular case, in the upper left hand corner is the parent image, followed in quick succession to the right and below by the various examples that you're going to be doing of this. Note that these examples were done in gouache, which is an opaque form of watercolor, which is extremely difficult to work with, although it was perfectly acceptable as a norm in advertising art probably 30 years ago or so, maybe even more. These were done by my fellow classmates back from my undergraduate program back in the mid-1970s, before the advent of computers. This is the way that we did things. The subject matter ranges all over the place. Here's mine. This is what I did. Back then we were trying to pick images that were recognizable, things that people would do, like I'm asking you to do now. Here I'm dating myself because this guy was only a few years out from having been the governor of a western state. He later went on to become the president of the United States. A lot of art was selected from popular magazine covers, and this was from Sports Illustrated. Other examples were from graphic styles popular in magazines in the time, and very early examples of science fiction art at the time. The key thing to note here is the examples and what was done to the images from the parent image all the way through the translation process. Hopefully you're going to find it easier going by doing these on the computer than we did having to do them in gouache. But I want you to have plenty of time to select images that you like, because you're going to be spending a bunch of time doing these. As you can see, there are a number of them that need to be done. So in this presentation, I hope that at least gives you some idea of what I want you to be looking for. I'm going to have you guys present examples of what you want to use as your parent image in the coming weeks, and I'd like you to submit those digitally. So be looking around both online and for examples that you might find from everyday life, and scan them in. One of the things that I didn't go over here, although it's a perfectly acceptable one, are popular like things like cereal boxes and other products that you could find in a grocery store. When done in the translation process, the examples are particularly shocking to see what happens to them when you pull them through all of the changes that we're going to make them do. Anyway, that's all for now. I just wanted to give you a heads up of things to be looking forward to, and I want you to be looking for a parent image. So go out and find something, okay?